everybody. How are you all doing? I'm going to wait a few minutes and see who's joining. So today we're going to be talking about Tartuffe in our month on Molière. I know that it seems to me that Tartuffe I think there's been less people reading it, maybe. The Goodreads group has been a bit silent. But yeah, maybe we could talk about it here. So yeah, we're just, I'm just going to wait a few minutes. I'll just talk about what I'm doing. So it's the end of the semester. There's all this papers. I'm working on a paper for a history course. And because I'm a literature person, I don't entirely know what is expected for a history paper. Also, historians write a lot more. And I tend to be a very concise writer, but like overly concise. Like I need to explain things more. So, I'm having my like moments of imposterhood where I'm like, what am I doing? And also I've been writing a lot. So because deadlines are the best motivation. I tell you, like if I need to get things done, deadlines will make me get things done. Actually, so I don't know if you know this, but Victoria Schwab, the YA author, she has a YouTube channel that she posts like once every 2 years on. And there was this video I saw where she talks about time management. And she talks about how it's not so much that she's great at time management, it's just that she's great at meeting deadlines. And I felt like that was so relatable because I look at the deadline and it's like if the deadline is just, not so far in the future, then that forces me to get the project done. And sometimes I can be even more efficient the less time I have. Now, this doesn't mean that I write the paper the night before, because I'm actually a really slow writer and I couldn't do that. But what it does mean is that I do need deadlines. So I really related to what she was saying. She kind of talks about cats and how cats can just fit in whatever container. They will fill that container. And I think that's a really good metaphor for the way that we who are like deadline-driven people work. Anyway, this is not at all related to Tartuffe, by the way. Okay, so Tartuffe. The question that I asked on Goodreads is about the title of Tartuffe. So the full title is Tartuffe ou l'imposteur, Tartuffe or the imposter. But the original title of the play was Tartuffe ou l'hypocrite, Tartuffe or the hypocrite. And what happened is that when the play was first performed, it was censored by Louis XIV, condemned, as you might imagine, for religious reasons. We don't know about, what was in the initial play, but we do know that the title was Tartuffe or the Hypocrite. So then Molière, he reworked it and he performed it, I think 3 years later. And by then the title had changed to Tartuffe or the Imposter. And the question, of course, is why might the title change be more palatable for Louis XIV and his kingdom? And, I'll offer an answer. In the original, there is this suggestion that Tartuffe was a priest. Okay. In the version we have, Tartuffe is not a priest. He's just, he's just a Catholic. He's a layperson. But in the original, he was a priest. And so, presenting him as a hypocrite was seen as an attack on the Catholic Church. I don't think it's entirely fair. But then censorship rarely is. The other thing is that the term hypocrisy was a term that was used by critics of the Catholic Church, including the Protestants. And so, a play like this was seen as like an attack on the Second Estate, which was the clergy. So in the Ancien Régime, which is France before the French Revolution, there were 3 estates. There was the first estate, which was the king and the nobles, second estate, which was the clergy, and the third estate, which is like everybody else. And at the second estate and the first estate were really closely linked, especially with Louis XIV, who was the first absolute monarch of France. And he was also the one who revoked the Edict of Nantes, which was an edict, that gave relative freedom to the Protestants in France, the Huguenots. But he revoked it, okay? So Louis XIV considered himself a divine right monarch, meaning that God had ordained him king. So as you can see, being king and, being like the leader of a church, like those two are really linked together, and the clergy have a lot of power. So, so the play, the original play titled Tartuffe or the Hypocrite, appeals, I guess, might be seen as appealing more to critics of the Catholic Church than, calling Tartuffe an imposter, because, well, first of all, he's not a priest, but second of all, he's not even a Christian. He's an imposter. Like, he pretends to be a good Catholic, but he's actually not. He's an imposter. And that doesn't implicate, like, the entire church. So the title change itself really points to the tone change, right? It points to a tone change. It also explains, like, knowing the history of censorship of this play really also explains why there is the Deus ex machina at the end, right? When Tartuffe is arrested. Because Tartuffe attempts to blackmail Orgon. Once Orgon finally understands that Tartuffe has been, seducing his wife, he decides to drive him out, and Tartuffe has incriminating information about Orgon, which Tartuffe basically is going to use against him, but somehow the king, who is always just so generous and so wise, was aware of how corrupt Tartuffe was and arrests him instead. Obviously, an ending like that is pandering to the king. Hello, Marianne. So I'm just talking about kind of certain elements of Tartuffe. Talked about the title change between Tartuffe or the Hypocrite, which was the original title of the play, and then sort of how that differs from the title that we have today, Tartuffe or the Imposter, because this play was censored. And, kind of thinking about where we might see that censorship in the new play, particularly the ending. The ending is definitely, I find disappointing. I mean, I can never give it more than 4 stars, because while I think most of the play is really brilliant and funny, and, Molière is just, I just love his poetry. Hello, Felide. The ending is always going to be disappointing to me, because it's like, let's get rid of the conflict. The king is just really wise. We'll just arrest Tartuffe instead. So yes, hello. I find this play also really interesting in what it says about family dynamics, because Orgon is the father of the family, and so he has a lot of power. He has power over his daughter, whom he wants married to Tartuffe. He wants his daughter to marry Tartuffe, which it's just nasty. But how much, it's just also really fascinating to see how, the bourgeois family is being presented in this one. Yeah, the local monarch. That is perfect. That is perfect. Like, honestly, this reminds me so like, I love how he says sponsored by, right? Because it reminds me so much of YouTube videos. And like, this is not really shade on sponsored content, because like, it's fun, get your money, but it's like, you make this entire, you make this video, and then there's like, there's like that one segment where it's like, I don't know, you made a video about productivity, and you're like, and now for sponsored content, there's this like app that's amazing for your productivity. And so like, just kind of put it in there. Molière had to do what he had to do, because he wasn't nearly as successful as Corneille, for example. And yeah, I wonder what the original ending was. I feel like this is the perfect play for fan fiction, because it's like, I don't think anybody's satisfied with the actual, with the ending of this play. So it's like, how would we end this play? So Orgon is going to be blackmailed by Tartuffe. His son has been driven out, like he's driven out his son. So his son is gone. Or did he allow his son to return? I don't remember what happened with the son. Does the son come back? I mean, I guess the son does come back. But, he's like in hot water. We like need another act. Like, this isn't really, how would you end the play? I feel like you have a lot of conflict right at the very end. So anyway, I was thinking, of the plays that might need new endings, Tartuffe would be one of them. Just like with Bourgeois Gentilhomme, we see the servants being the ones who know what's going on. They're the ones who, they laugh at the bourgeois, which I think Orgon is a bourgeois again, who's just, carried away by Tartuffe and to everything else. What are your thoughts? Let's see if what we can come up with. So the original play was performed in 1667. No, 1664. And it was performed at Versailles itself. And then it was condemned by the Archbishop of Paris, because, of course, it's an attack on the Catholic Church. And so then he has to completely redo it. I think there's also, there was a lot of suggestions that the play was pandering not only to like the Protestants, but also to the Jansenists, who were a certain kind of Catholic with kind of more Calvinist beliefs. That's like a very loose way of describing the Jansenists, but they were also considered heretics. And so I think that was like targeting hypocrisy in the church is going to be condemned. But yeah, I mean, hey, and I think this continues the conversation that we started having last week about art and about art for art's sake versus art for money. And and what the ethics of making art is. Because it's clear here that someone like Molière, the censorship surprised me. I thought Cléante made it clear Tartuffe was a scoundrel, but not a real religious person. Yeah, the problem is that we don't actually know what the original play said. So it's very possible that alongside this Deus ex machina ending, you have lines that really emphasize how Tartuffe is not a real religious person. I would think that something like that is also part of the censorship, because we don't have the original text. I don't think we do. Let's see. Yeah. we don't have the text anymore. So that's probably what happened. That's the problem, is that, we can see that it's been censored because of these ridiculous endings, but we also don't know, what was the original, right? It's really, it's kind of disappointing. It's like, what was the original? Like, what did Molière intend? We don't really know. But anyway, back to the question of art, right? Molière, because he is this playwright who needs money, and evidently he was actually pretty broke. Like, he wasn't making the big bucks. He, if he wants to get an audience, he's going to have to modify his art to please his audience. And if his audience is the king or the archbishop, maybe sometimes pandering is an important part of what it means to be a professional. And maybe you're gonna have to make some compromises. Let's see. I am on the most important website, also known as Wikipedia. And actually, this seems a pretty good Wikipedia page, so, I'm on the French Wikipedia. So the archbishop, who, by the way, his name was Ardouin de Pérefix, which is a name, I tell you, was actually the former tutor of Louis XIV. And I think Louis XIV at the time was young, so his mother, was there a regent? I don't know, but yeah, basically the tutor became the archbishop and was like, this is not okay. We need to condemn this play. And the king is said to have said, while we are in full crisis of Catholicism, it is dangerous to allow for public representation of a play that risks sapping the authority of the church. So that is evidently what the king had to say. But I mean, this gets at the heart of censorship. And I mean, if you want to, we can talk about censorship, because I have thoughts about censorship. And I always, every year when there's like banned book week, I want to make a video talking about censorship, because I think that we are seeing censorship today, but so we'll always see kind of the sort of censorship of like the conservative censorship. But I don't see enough discussions about like more liberal censorship and what it means to ban a book. In this case, the play being banned means that it cannot be performed, right? It can't be published because the parliament had control over the printing presses. Like, quite literally, this play, Tartuffe, would have been banned. I mean, we have no copies of this play, right? Like, whatever copies existed were destroyed. That's not what we mean when we talk about banned books. We don't mean that, okay? If you talk about a children's book that was banned, right? Let's say a Roald Dahl book that was banned. This doesn't mean that the book wasn't published. It doesn't mean that, it might mean that certain groups of people might have had book burnings, like that's true. It might mean that certain schools don't want the book taught, that's true. But it doesn't mean that the book is completely destroyed. It doesn't mean that the book isn't published. Although, quite recently, there was this whole case on BookTube. I don't know if you guys were following it, if any of you follow BookTube. I think it was on Twitter, actually. And it was of a YA book. It was a young adult book. I don't entirely understand the details. I think the author was Asian American and was writing like fantasy set in like an alternative China. I think it was dealing with slavery. and the book wasn't even published yet, right? So people had received advanced review copies, and it was a huge outcry about this book. And I mean, the publishers initially stopped the book from being published, right? That's a book banning. I mean, that is quite literally a book banning, right? Like, this is what we're talking about here. I mean, when we talk about book banning, that is a book banning. Eventually, I think they pushed the date forward, and then the book was published, and whatever. And I'm fascinated because, well, okay, I guess the reason why I've wanted to make this video or talk about it here, is because a lot of times when we do talk about book bannings, first we think about it in terms of like the book is not published, not available, manuscripts are destroyed, like that full-scale banning that we see here in the case of Tartuffe. That's not always the case. A lot of times when we talk about book banning, we're talking about schools not wanting to teach the book, religious organizations not believing the book is good or thinking it's damaging to people. But the book is still published, it's still available, you can still find it, right? That's important. I think that, there's this idea that the most of the books on the banned book list in the United States, like that's usually what has happened. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we get this impression that banning books is something that is exclusive to conservatives. So during Banned Book Week, I always see books that have been banned because they include LGBTQ plus content, because it deals with witchcraft, because whatever, right? Whatever the issue is, race, whatever the issue topic is. And we see that the book was banned, right? Like in certain spheres, maybe it teaches evolution, and so it's banned by certain school districts. But I have yet to see people talk on Banned Book Week about books that have been pulled from curriculum for being racist, for being homophobic, for maybe not having good representation, being problematic, as we like to, use on BookTube. And we are seeing that. I remember that when I was in high school, there were discussions about Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, which I think Joseph Conrad is a brilliant writer, and I think he's an incredible prose stylist. However, there's definitely racism in his books. I mean, one of his books has the N-word in the title. So, but anyway, there was these discussions as to whether or not a book like this should be taught in school. That kind of conversation is this is the kind of conversation that surrounds book bannings. Like that is the same kind of discussion. If a school district decided to not teach Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness because it's racist, that's banning a book. And I guess what I want to say is that I actually sympathize with that. I wonder, whenever I see people say I'm opposed to banning books, and then I see them joining in, being very critical of problematic content in a book or whatever, which I always think is just bad writing. American Dirt is a fantastic example of that. Here in Switzerland, I totally understand the criticism, okay? I totally understand it. Basically, my understanding is that the author of American Dirt got a huge advance. And there's all this marketing that was put into this book being published. It deals with undocumented immigrants, I think. And it's very problematic in its representation. And of course, there are books written by people of color. Anyway, so there's all these discussions about it. And people were really angry. And just the kind of length, the conversations about it really seemed as if people... I don't know if banned is the right term. I suppose if it were going to be taught in schools or sold in bookstores, people didn't want them sold in certain bookstores. That is what we're talking about. And I guess what I want to say is that I think that there is a place for banning books. Perhaps. I mean, maybe there is. Maybe we do, to some degree, support banning books. My grandfather's book, History of the Honduran Military, was banned and still is after over 50 years later. Only the military has copies. Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow. Yeah, and that is definitely a banning right there. The military has the only copies. And like, I'm sure the book was telling a lot of truths. Very cool. That's wow. That is really, really neat. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, of course, I like to think of myself as somewhat of a progressive person. I mean, I don't know, whatever. But in any case, yeah, a book like this, I wouldn't be banning a book on the history of the Honduran military. I actually, I hate to say that I want to ban books, but I do think that having conversations about the books that are taught in schools is a valuable conversation to have. And I'd like to see us address that question when we talk about censorship and book banning, because that's really what is often the case, is that people are concerned that certain books are not appropriate for children. And that can mean that, well, the parents are really bigoted and like don't want their children to be open-minded or whatever. But it can also be that, maybe the parents are concerned that the child is like, I mean, if somebody were to assign Mein Kampf to 10-year-olds, like I think most people would be a little bit concerned. I mean, of course, I'm not saying that that book should never be taught, because I do think that there is an importance in reading books like this. I mean, I work on trials and Inquisition trials. Like, it's not pleasant, right? But audience matters, and I do think that most people, and maybe I'm wrong, would be a little bit concerned about like Mein Kampf being taught in schools. Of course, it would depend on how it's taught, but having this conversation about that is important. This isn't what's going on with Tartuffe. What's going on with Tartuffe is that the book isn't, I mean, the play isn't even available in its original form. We don't have it. They destroyed it. Nor am I suggesting that we go around burning books. But what I am saying is that when we talk about banning books during Banned Book Week, we need to realize that we're not actually talking about 5 copies of the book being available owned by the military. Like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about books that have been criticized by organizations because they don't think that they should be taught. I don't know. Like, what do you think? Like, this is my opinion on that. This is how I don't even know what books I would, like, how I would change the curriculum. As someone who works on the Dead White Men, I it's fine with me. But how do you feel? Like, how do you feel about censorship? Like, legitimately, how have you understood censorship? Let's see. Let's see how many. So now they call them banned and challenged classics. It's by the American Librarians Association. And it deals with the question of intellectual freedom. So you've got The Great Gatsby that has been banned. But see, he says challenged at the Baptist College in Charleston, because of language and sexual references in the book. So you see, it was challenged. Catcher in the Rye. Okay, so this teacher was fired for assigning the book to an 11th grade class. Delegation of parents of high school students in Columbus, Ohio, Ohio's my state, asked the school board to ban the novel for being anti-white and obscene. Anti-white. Wow, okay. And we just keep going down. We have Grapes of Wrath, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Color Purple. I want to see if there's any books on here that are actually, I wouldn't say surprising. Yeah, I mean, that might, talk about censorship on the left. I haven't really found that. I'm seeing this more, though, on Twitter. Amongst the YA crowd. And again, I kind of get it. Great Gatsby has some pretty racist scene. That would be my first concern there. Okay. Yeah, great point. I've only read The Great Gatsby once. I thought it was okay, but I would want to reread it. There is definitely a point to be made for books that we teach children, because children are impressionable. Teenagers are children. I mean, they're older children, but their brains are still forming. And, I think that there is something to say for thinking about how children are taught, plain and simple. I remember I was teaching French to a kid, and we were reading Curious George, which, if anybody of you don't know, Curious George is about this monkey that has, it's this monkey. I remember he has a owner who wears a yellow hat. He's called the man with the yellow hat. And we were reading Curious George in French, and it was racist, guys. Like, it wasn't even just like subtly racist. It was racist. And it was shocking to me because I loved Curious George as a kid. Maybe it was this book, I don't know. But I didn't say anything to the child. I was like, oh, let's go find something different. I just kind of like fired for a catcher in the rye. Yeah. Let's see what it says. Let me go. I'm on their website, basically. So it says, in 1960, a teacher in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was fired for assigning the book to an 11th grade English class. The teacher appealed and was reinstated by the school board, but the book was removed from use in the school. The other ones have just been books that parents have objected to, removed from the Issaquah, Washington optional high school reading list, removed from the required reading list, removed from this reading list, removed from this school library. So you can see, it's removed from like particular institutions. It's not like, I mean, there might have been book burnings. I don't know. People do burn books. You have to understand too, at this time, I mean, I don't want to get too dark, but they would ban the books. And if the person was really considered a heretic, okay, the person would be burned with the book. Okay, so they were burning humans too. As far as I mean, I might be wrong. I don't think anybody was burned for these book burning. I mean, I don't know. Like, I haven't gone through the whole list. Most of it is just people being like, oh, that has too much swearing. It's whatever. But I want to see if there's other books that have been banned. Well, satanic verses. Okay, I can see that being banned. Now, all the books that are on this list are like more, books banned by conservative organizations. The Lord of the Rings was burned in Alamogordo, New Mexico, outside Christ Community Church, along with other Tolkien novels, as satanic. Which is interesting because the books are opposed to Satan. Like, that's kind of who the Dark Lord is. Interesting, the Call of the Wild was burned in Nazi bonfires. Guys, read the book. Fired for a Catcher in the Rye. Yes, hello, Pierre Louis. I don't know. Have there been... I do just hear people talking about books being taken off of reading lists, like Paradise Lost which I love. The Diary of Anne Frank was banned many years ago in the South, of course. Oh, I'm sure, yeah. There are lots and lots of these books on the list are banned because they're considered anti-white, or in this case, Jewish would be, So yeah, I mean, of course, these books would be banned. There are, and it gets to also to questions of like age range. My understanding is that middle grade is checked for content. So it is edited for content. YA less so. So you can have, for example, swearing and sex on the page. And actually, more and more YA is becoming very mature. Middle grade, obviously, you're not going to have sex on the page for a 10-year-old. So they do actually edit books for content. Also for language, like making sure that, there might be a few difficult words here and there, but you like don't want it to be, in academic writing or something. I mean, you wouldn't want that for anybody anyway, but they definitely, I do know that middle grade is edited for content. One of the things I've tried to do in the last few years is reread, or in some cases read for the first time, Newbery Award winners. It's like a challenge that I've taken on, and it's a lot of fun because most of these books are quite excellent. But I mean, you go back certain years, and I know there's a book called Hitty, Her First 100 Years, which is a book that won the Newbery Award. Newbery Award, by the way, for those of you who aren't American, is a children's book award, okay? It's considered the highest children's book award for American authors. Or is it books published in the US? I don't actually know the details. But anyway, Hitty, the First 1,000 Years, it deals with a doll, and like as the doll comes to life and tells the story of who her owners were. And the original editions had the N-word in the book at several points. And nowadays editions of Hitty, because schools tend to be the ones who buy Newbery Award books, they don't include the N-word anymore in them, which is fine with me. Okay. And not only is it fine with me, but it's a children's book. So, I mean, I think about like giving a book like this to a 10-year-old, and I wouldn't. But there are people who are like, you have edited out the book. You have censored the book, which it is. I mean, it is censorship. You've removed words from the book. But then, once again, I think, yeah, it is censorship. I feel like I want to be maybe the first to say, you know what? I do support some book censorship. I read Hitty. I just remember it was kind of weird and freaky. I read it years ago, and I remember enjoying it, and I wanted to return to it. But also, I was like really young, and I don't know if I really followed any of it. So I do want to reread it. But there was all these comments people in the comments were like, oh, this book has been censored. The N-word has been removed. Which, yeah, that is censorship. I mean, that is exactly what that is. But I do think that there is censorship. That I think perhaps the question is, what is the content that is being censored, rather than whether censorship is good or bad. I can see the purpose of it, especially for children. Again, they're impressionable. Adults, I think that's a different matter. But for children, yeah, I can totally see that. I think ultimately the issue with these banned books is that they were being banned because the people are racist or homophobic or anti-Semitic or whatever, and they don't want books that challenge their views. So it's all these banned book lists online. Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence for sexual intercourse. Oh, it's it's one of the first books to have sexual content in it, definitely. Brave New World was considered pornography. Tropic of Cancer, an open sewer, a pit of putrefaction, a slimy gathering of all that is rotten in the debris of human depravity. Wow, that is a condemnation. I'm currently having to read a book by Michel Houellebecq, who is a French author, and he is a provocateur. He is someone who has created this persona that the far right really loves, and his books contain misogyny, Islamophobia, particularly homophobia, like the whole gamut, right? And he's a huge author, and I could totally understand why we're assigned this book. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but like, wow, like this guy is really trying to it's that whole question of like, when is a book, and when is it more than a book, right? When is a book actually harmful? Can we even say that books are harmful, or are books just stories? They're not real, so then we can't take them seriously? Or can we say that books can be harmful? Anyway, because 40 minutes have gone by and I probably have to make some point about Tartuffe, clearly the king and the priests thought that this play was harmful. Whereas now we just read it and go, the ending is so terrible. Like, no. But definitely go watch adaptations. It's really, really good. Any kind of final thoughts about censorship? About questions of censorship, about whether censorship is good, or whether, especially if censorship, I mean, if you come from a country where censorship is common, and you want to talk about that, feel free to do so. I'm fascinated with discussions of this. Also, when you ban a book, people want to read it. I mean, it's like, oh, I want to read the book now. I'm sure sales went up for American Dirt as soon as everybody was criticizing it. Let's see. No? Well, this has been a good discussion. Maybe we should, I mean, we started out talking about Tartuffe. We ended up talking about banning books. This was fun and thought-provoking. Nope, I'm glad it was thought-provoking. I thought, we could start with the play, but, let's expand it a little bit. Also, it just seemed like less people read the book. So, kind of expanding into a discussion about censorship, I think is valuable. And also, I think very important today, in certain spheres. I don't read young adult books much, or I guess some classics would be considered YA. I do read quite a bit of middle grade, and so some of these questions I think are still very relevant. Next week we will be reading L'École des Femmes, so that is translated as the School for Women. It embroiled Molière into a literary debate. Censorship is never good. You're right the second you ban a book and makes it more popular. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I wonder about, removing books from lists. I think if that's made public, then, yeah, everyone's going to read the book. I don't know if I think the censorship is never good. I guess part of me thinks, well, it would depend. I guess if censorship is, depends on age. I wouldn't say it's censorship across the board, but, maybe in school settings. I guess that's the thing. I do feel like I want to, have the dissenting voice here and say I think that some censorship is good if it's in certain contexts. And then again, it's more of a question of what the content is. But even saying that makes me uncomfortable. I don't know. I guess I just want our discussions about banned books to be more complicated than they are. That's more of it. But anyway, so next week we're doing L'École des Femmes. That play was also controversial, and it embroiled Molière into a literary debate. And we will talk about the literary debate next week, along with the play and anything else that will come up in our discussion. So yes, thank you for joining. This was lots of fun, as it is every Sunday. And I hope you guys have a great week. I know things are opening up all around the world. So be safe. And yeah, I hope you guys have a fantastic week.